think Hillel has to leave early, and we'll chit-chat maybe. We're going to be learning this Kuntis Hachinuch, Klolei Hachinuch V'Adracha. Right, this is the latest English volume that Chabad produced several years ago, but there are other versions. So if you don't have this one, and Yaakov, I thank Yaakov, he got us to online at HebrewBooks.org. He said, I think he sent a link. So anyway, but an introduction is necessary. What is this sefer we're about to study, this treatise? So in 1898, Tafresh Nun Ches, the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok, had an issue in the yeshiva. You know, he was the manahel. He was the what we would call the administrator of the yeshiva, working for his father, the Rebbe Rashab, Reb Shalom Ber. The yeshiva was established. Tomchei Tmimim Lubavitch is the official name of the Lubavitch yeshiva. Many times you'll only hear it as Tomchei Tmimim. And today, because we live in a modern world, sometimes you'll hear it. Do you go to Tomchei? They won't even say Tomchei Tmimim. They'll say, do you go to Tomchei? Tomchei Tmimim. Tomchei is the one word that stands for Tomchei Tmimim Lubavitch, which is the real full name of the yeshiva, of the brand of Chabad Yeshivot. Yeshivas is Tomchei Tmimim. Now, the Rebbe Rashab added the name Toras Emes to the yeshiva that he established in 1911 in Hebron. And subsequent to that, it moved to Yerushalayim. And today it's called Toras Emes. But Toras Emes was a division of Tomchei Tmimim. For whatever reason, he chose the name Toras Emes in Eretz Yisrael. Then there's another name for the yeshivas called Achei Tmimim. Achei Tmimim was a name given by the previous Rebbe to the yeshiva, what they call in the yeshiva world, yeshiva katanos. The yeshivas for younger division. So the name that the previous Rebbe suggested and used in the 1940s, when there were many of these type of branches, was Achei Tmimim, the brothers of the Tmimim. So we have Tomchei Tmimim. Tomchei Tmimim is it's part of the verse in Simchas Torah when we dance with the Torah. I believe it's the 5th Hakafa. When we say Tomech Tmimim Hoishiano, the supporters of the sincere ones, help us. And the Rebbe Rashab, and that in 1898, he stopped over there, and he said, this will now be the name of the yeshiva. In other words, although he established the yeshiva, Chai Elul, Tofresh Nun Zayin, Chai Elul 1897, it wasn't until almost 2 years later, during Hakofis, where he actually gave the name to the yeshiva. Before that, it was not called Tomchei Tmimim. It had no name. I guess they called it a Chabad Yeshiva, Lubavitch Yeshiva. The name Tomchei Tmimim came on Simchas Torah at the 5th Hakafa after they read the word, or before they read the section Tomech Tmimim. And at that time, the Rebbe Rashab said those students that learn in the Lubavitch Yeshiva are called Tamimim, which is the plural for the word Tamim. So you might be in a shul and you'll hear a gabbai call up, Yamoid HaTamim Yaakov Bababa. His name is not Tamim, his name is Yaakov. And he's not a Rav, he's not a Rav. He's not even a mister, he's a bacher. But if he learns in the Lubavitch Yeshiva, this is not the way it was when I was growing up. We were called up by our name. But today, everything gets more advanced because they're more sophisticated and they're greater chassidim today. So today, you might hear in a shul, someone's called up, Yamoid HaTamim, and then his name. When you hear that Hatamim, that means that he learns in Tomchei Tmimin. Okay? So, here we have a yeshiva that was established in 1897. Who did the Rebbe Rashab and the previous Rebbe, who were the students that established the yeshiva? And these students were, by large, students who came from Chabad homes, and they were very learned. And how old were they? 18 to 20 years old. That's how he established. In other words, he didn't establish a cheder at that time. He did not establish a yeshiva katana. He established what you call today a yeshiva gedola, a beis medrash, for 18 to 20-year-old students. That's what he did. And they were very knowledgeable in Gemara and Talmud. Their knowledge of Chassidus was minimal. Now you're probably wondering, wait a minute, if they came from authentic Lubavitch Chabad families, why didn't they know Chassidus at 18 to 20 years old? And the answer is, they did know, Tanya, some Likutei Torah. They had basic understanding of ideas, but they weren't immersed in Hasidic thought where they studied it daily for hours. That concept of studying Hasidus in a Lubavitch yeshiva 3 to 4 hours a day. At that time, by the Rashab, when he established the yeshiva, he established that 2 hours you study before Shachris and 2 hours before you go to sleep. That never was in Chabad, because there was no official yeshiva, although the Tzemach Tzedek already, the third Rebbe, had a yeshiva, but it was maybe you could say under the guidance of the Tzemach Tzedek and his son-in-law Rebbe Levi Yitzchak, but there wasn't a emphasis on Hasidus learning in a formal way. I assume one could learn what he wants and things like that. To be part of the curriculum in an organized way with a Rebbe, a teacher, and a Mashpiim, I don't believe they had. So it wasn't until the Rashab who revolutionized the system within Chabad itself, and because of various reasons. One is that the Haskalah had crept in to the best of the yeshivas. I think I've told you many times that in 1892, the Volozhin yeshiva that was opened for nearly 100 years closed. And the reason it closed, contrary to what it says in various books that are printed in your library, probably, and in the Eish Kodesh library, and in other libraries, the reason it closed is because the students became maskilim, enlightened, many of them, most of them, to the point where they threatened the Anhola, and you're talking about people like Reb Chaim Brisker and the Netziv and others, and they basically cautioned them and warned them that if they do not allow the reading of Haskalah books in the yeshiva, they will make revolutions and rebellions and a lot of trouble. That, coupled with the government demanding that the yeshiva system study Russian writing and speaking and Russian studies, etc., which of course the Volozhin yeshiva was a very frum yeshiva and didn't want to do that. So because of those reasons, they shut the doors. And they never reopened the doors. They then transferred to Slobodka and then, Kamenetz and Mir and all kinds of yeshivas popped up. But the main yeshiva in the 1800s for the Litvische world was Volozhin. And it was a very powerful yeshiva. And many great Talmidei Chachamim came out of the yeshiva. But Nebuch Haskalah ruined that yeshiva. Here, the Rashab, only 5 years later, in 1897, with his son, the Raayatz, they say, we're opening yeshiva. The elder Lubavitcher Hasidim, when they heard that, they were opposed to it, and they said, you're out of your mind. You see that Volozhin just closed down because Haskalah crept into the yeshiva system and dominated you're going to be able to make a yeshiva where that's not going to happen? You're in the same vicinity, and you're dealing with the same issues and the same students. Okay, you have maybe students that come from Hasidic background, but nevertheless, we know that there was already a breakdown in the late 1800s in the most Hasidic families too, because of Haskalah. And the Rebbe Rashab said, I hear you, I hear you, but the yeshiva that we will make, my son and I will make, we will create what he called Neiros Lahoyer. In English, we translate that as lamplighters. Students that not only will be tmimim, sincere and committed, and will reject Haskalah, but they'll actually ignite the souls of other students to be like them. And he said, those that want to help me, and those that don't want to help me, have a nice day. That's what kind of powerful man that Rashab was. That although he didn't have a penny to his name, he said, this is what we're doing. And he did it, and he had 2 or 3 supporters, wealthy people, and they helped him, and he started his yeshiva, and he created these tamimim, and they did not fall into Haskalah. Were there battles in the yeshiva? There were, but as I've told you over the years we've been learning, he took a very harsh stance, and he had to sometimes throw them out of the yeshiva and burn their books in the yeshiva-based medrash. I mean, you can't imagine how this was a machla, a pandemic that was going on in Russia at the time. And that Rashab was forced to do things that he would normally not do because by nature he was a very kind person. But in order for Haskalah not to continue, he had to put an end to it. And he said, what will be the tool that will give these students the ability to fight the system of Haskalah? Chassidus. But not Chassidus the way Lubavitchers have been learning it informally. We're going to organize it. And just like you learn Gemara and Tosfos and Rashi and Mefarshim, and you mefalpel, you use pilpul, and you argue back and forth until you get clarity. The same way I want the students to learn Chassidus. And that too was revolutionary. Yes, Hillel.
So would it be fair to say that this was sort of the first curriculum in Chassidus?
Yes. Not only fair to say, absolutely. There's not even a question. It's not even a question. Mm-hmm. Within the entire Hasidic world, there's not even a question.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway,
right.
So he says Chassidus will do it. Now, who's going to teach Chassidus? Who are going to be the teachers? I've told you this too, but I'm always fascinated when I repeat it. He chose 2 people who yet were from the time of the Tzemach Tzedek. She's talking about 1850s, 40s, 1840s, 50s. Elder Hasidim. One was named Rabbi Groinom Esterman. In Chabad we call him Groinom. He's known as Groinom. And the other one was named Reb Hendel Kugel, who became known as Hendel. So we have Groinom and Hendel. They were men with white beards, elder chassidim, removed from the world, and they're going to be the Mashpiim to teach and inspire these 18 to 20-year-olds. That's what the Rebbe Rashab said. And why do I say it's fascinating? Because Groinom was really a chassid of his father, of the Tzemach Tzedek and his father, not of him. And nevertheless, he felt that only a person coming from the past will communicate the essence of Chabad that he got from the past to the new generation. So although he doesn't learn my Chassidus, and I'm the current Lubavitcher Rebbe, I put myself aside for the betterment of the students, and he chose Groinom. Reb Hendel, who by the way happens to be a relative of my wife's family, and a Mendel Futterfas, that whole family. So Reb Hendel, he was able to make the transition from the Tzemach Tzedek to the Maharash and to the Rashab. Some people, I'm going to use an example that's a little colorful. If, for whatever reason, they end up with a second wife, for whatever reason, some people are able to transfer their feelings and commitment to their second wife as to the first, and some cannot. Even if they're married, it's not the same. And it's in fact very rare in the world of Rebbes and Hasidim to be able to transfer your allegiance to the new Rebbe as you had to the older Rebbe. And one that's able to do that has a special virtue. Okay? So Hendel, it seems like, because he was, the previous Rebbe calls him hearts. He was all heart. He was a heart chassid. He wasn't really this intellectual chassid. Everything was heart, emotions, and yet he was Chabad. So he was able to give over his heart and his feelings to the new young Rebbe, who he was older than by quite a few years, the Rebbe Rashab. And these two are the educators. Okay. The yeshiva starts with these I think 17 or 18 Bachrim. There's three different gears, 17, 18 or 20, whatever. 17 to 20 Bachrim. And a year later, now 1898, it started in 1897, the Rebbe Rashab says, I want that some Bacharim, some students, to go to learn in a city called Zhembin, Zhembin, which wasn't far from Lubavitch, right? The yeshiva started in Lubavitch. And he says, what I'm going to do is send Groinom there, and Hendel will remain in Lubavitch. It's not really clear why he wanted that, but it could be that since Groinom and Hendel were two different type of people, Groinom was the intellectual and Hendel was the emotional one, maybe he felt after seeing for a year how the students are developing that it would be best to separate them. I don't know, but that's what he did. The Rashab, you should know, micromanaged this yeshiva to the T. He was on top of it through his son, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak the Raayatz. This Raayatz, the Menahel, gave him constant reports of what was going on, and they were on top of each student, and they wrote reports. And it came a time where the Mashpiim had issues with some of the students. And what were the issues? They really didn't want to learn Hasidus. They grew up learning Gemara, even though they came from a Lubavitcher home, some Tanya, some Likutei Torah, but they really wanted to learn Hasidus, right? So they had an issue. So Rabbi Groinom and Hendel said to the Rebbe Rashab, what do? We have a problem here. To the previous Rebbe, to the Menahel. So he went to his father. Father, what do? They're not interested in Hasidus. Serious learning Hasidus. So the Rebbe Rashab said, I'm going to give you a treatise of letters that I wrote 10 years prior, in 1888. I'm going to give it to you, and you take that and make it into an educational manual. And for 3 months, the Rebbe Rashab, the previous Rebbe, used his father's material that he wrote 10 years earlier, and that was sent to his brother-in-law. And I'm trying to find out why, and no one knows so far why, what was going on in 1888, that he wrote those letters and treatise to his brother-in-law. I don't know why, but that's what he says he did. And he gave that to the previous Rebbe 10 years later in 1898. And he spent 3 months and he came up with this treatise called Klolei Hachinuch Vadracha, the principles of education and guidance. Yes, Moshe.
Sorry, Rebbe Dov, I'm just going to go back. In 1888, the Rebbe Raayatz wrote...
The Rebbe Rashab.
The Rashab.
Rashab.
And we say...
Go ahead.
We say his brother-in-law. Which brother-in-law?
Rabbi, his name was Rabbi Moshe HaKohen Hordenstein.
Okay.
He married a sister of the Rebbe Rashab. I believe her name was Hachinuch, I think. Okay?
Okay.
So, but I don't know why. It doesn't say why, what was going on then that he wrote those letters. So I don't know. But he said to his son, I'm going to send you that. You take that, develop it, make it into an educational manual. So the previous Rebbe, 3 months with drafts going back to his father and his father editing it. And finally, I believe an Elul of Reish Nun Ches, an Elul of 1898, the manual was finished. And he then gave it to the two Mashpiim. The manual was first was written for the Mashpiim, for the teachers, who were to use that as an educational tool to succeed in getting them to work better with the students so that the students want to learn Chassidus, etc. So you need to know this in the background, that it was kind of written to begin with a very focused agenda. Nevertheless, what's the name of this sefer? Klolei. Klolei. What does Klolei mean? They translate in English as the principles. In Hebrew, the word klolei means klalim, rules, but generalities. In other words, the name, and I by the way, I don't know if the Frierdiker Rebbe chose the name or the Rashab. I assume the Rashab was the one that substantiated the name, because everything the previous Rebbe did, he was working for his father, needed his father's approval. So I'm sure that Rashab, again, maybe the previous Rebbe chose it and he approved it, but that's the name. So the name itself is indicative of a general manual, which tells you, I'm giving you the klalim. Now it's up to you two, Mashpiim and teachers, to articulate it in details. So when we learn this, you'll see some general rules, and later he kind of breaks it down a little bit, but some things remain general, because he did not, in a sense, for whatever reason, write a manual which is all spelled out. And I would say, given the Chabad system is Chochma Bina Das, he wants them to use their seichel, their brains, their intellect, to take the general rules and apply it appropriately to the situation on hand. Because every situation is different. So if you were to say you must do this, well, that's in 1898. Who says it'll apply in 1998? So by writing the rules, the klalim, he says, here are the klalim. And if you study these klalim and you understand these klalim, you will know how to apply it in any situation. And that's why this treatise becomes relevant today, although it was written over 100 years ago. It's relevant because it gives general guidelines for education and guidance. Another point. Not only is it relevant to the situation of Tomchei Tmimim to understand the students, where they're coming from. Oh, an important point I didn't say. So what is the kind of the one line, what we call in marketing, the tagline? What's the tagline or the mission statement? It's a pasuk in, I believe, Mishlei. Chanoich linar al pi darkoi. educate the lad based on his derech. That you could summarize the entire kuntres, the entire essay, in that one line. That in order to succeed with a student, you must understand the student and understand that each student is different than the other student, and you need to give a system of chinuch, of education, that's appropriate for that student, and which might not be appropriate for the next student. And boys, that's a lot of work. That's why teachers, Rebbes, should get paid a lot more. Because a proper educator isn't just putting everyone in a room and just giving one shiur. I mean, that's, in a way, we do it, but then you have to call the student over and break it down with him individually and see where he's coming from. And that's what he does a lot of in this treatise. The previous Rebbe talks about where was he born? What was the home like? Was it wealthy? Was it poverty? Was it an expansive community? Was it a little shtetl? These are things you're going to see he talks about. Because to understand the student, Darkoi will give you more success. So he's telling the Rebbe is saying to the Mashpiim, you're telling me you're not succeeding in getting them to learn Chassidus. You're telling me that they're not, they don't have great obedience and things like that. So the Rebbe Rashab, the previous Rebbe is saying, you don't know your students. You haven't studied your students. You're just a teacher shining light, and you're a great teacher, and you have great knowledge and feelings for Hasidus and the Hasidic way. But you didn't assess properly the student because you don't know him. So get to know your student, you'll have more success. That's the foundation of this kuntris. Before we go inside, any questions? Okay, let's go. Let's turn to the first page. Okay. Translation and commentary. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start on page 21, and when we finish, I will review page 18 and 19, because that's really it's a synopsis of the 17 chapters, but it's really meaningless unless you learn and understand the chapters. So we'll get back to 18, 19 at the end.
Dolphin?
Yes.
Rabbi Dolphin, was the original written in Lashon HaKodesh, or was it written in Yiddish?
It was written in Lashon HaKodesh, and I'm glad you asked me about that, because that's something else that I meant to say and I forgot. The way this is written is not like any other document in Chabad. This is not written in a yeshivish Hebrew of the time, and probably not even today. It's actually written in a very sophisticated Hebrew and literary style. Very unusual. And this is a question that people have thought about for years. I saw one writer who says that maybe the reason it's written in the sophisticated Hebrew and literary style is because it was to counter the Haskalah. The Haskalah was printing in Hebrew books and literature, and it attracted the youth because it spoke of the language was rich, right? So it could be that the previous Rebbe and the Rashab decided, in order to get this across to the people at the time and the students, we need to, write it in this unusual, sophisticated Hebrew and literary style. But that's a thought. It doesn't say anywhere why it was written this way, but you will notice in the Hebrew it's written in a very different way than any other, not only Chabad document, probably any other document of the time. It's not Yeshiva Hebrew, okay? but it was written in Hebrew. 21. Maimer Klolei Hachinuch V'Hadracha. So it's interesting. He calls it a Maimer. I don't know if he means here a Hasidic discourse, but he does call it a Maimer. Again, the English translation of much of this is not literal, so we're going to read the Hebrew on your own. If you want to look at the English, or sometimes I'll refer to the English, that's fine, but I'd like to focus on the actual words of the Rebbe. So, Maimer Klolei Hachinuch V'Hadracha, this is a Maimer of the general principles of education and guidance. Aleph. The caption, the title for the first paragraph is Teiras Hachinuch V'Hadracha. The field, the Torah of education, of Chinuch, and Hadracha and guidance. Hachinuch V'Hadracha hi Torah Shlema. Education and guidance is an entire Torah. It's an entire treatise, an idea. Bahalachos merubos, with many laws, many details, mistafim, which come as a result of lipirkei hachshara upirkei hanoga, to have proper preparation and proper conduct. In other words, what is he saying in this first line and a half? That chinuch is not something you get by eating bagels and by sniffing other people's ideas. It's a Torah Shlema. You have to study it. And you have to know that there's many details. And when you study all the details of chinuch, of education, this will create hachshara, preparation, from the word kasher, and it also create hanhaga from the word mahani, conduct. In who will this create this? Hein mitzad hamachanech. This will be the result in the educator, v'hamadrich, and the guide, and also v'hein mitzad hamechunech v'hamudrich. It will also create it in the educated and in the guided, meaning the student. They too will benefit in their conduct and in their preparation when they will benefit from these laws, these Torah Shlema of Chinuch. Uv'chlalusa, the Rebbe says, generally speaking, hirabas ho'achrayus, it is a great responsibility, v'avoida kosha ukveda, and it's a hard and heavy service, b'yagia atzuma, with great effort and diligence, b'yagias nefesh, effort of the soul, v'yagias basar, and effort of the flesh, that is required in studying and understanding chinuch. So the previous Rebbe says, if you expect a free and a quick ride in mastering education, you're wrong. And this, by the way, corresponds to secular writing and educators. We have a plethora of manuals and books on education, from Dr. Spock to whoever the latest contemporary educator is, right? And the Rebbe says, well, in Yiddishkeit, in Torah, chinuch is also, look at his words, avoida kosho kveda. There's no quick rides here. It's hard, Yaini. To be a successful teacher is hard. A successful parent is maybe even harder. But, b'yagia atzuma, 1 second, Yodison. B'yagia atzuma, if you'll work diligently and hard, and you'll schwitz, and not only schwitzing of your body, but yagias nefesh, your neshama, your soul will be invested to the point of Yegia, you will have good results. Yes, Yonason.
Yeah, the word on the second line, Mista'afim. What's the root of that word?
The root is lehista'ef, histaifus. There's a word used in Hasidus Chabad, histaifus, histafut. The Hebrew is, I don't know if it's the root, but lehista'ef. Just for a moment, what's the English word they use here? A comprehensive discipline and many principles of proper general education and so he doesn't really address the word, but it comes from the Hebrew word. What?
That's why I'm asking.
That's why I told you before, Yonason, that it is very difficult to translate this treatise in a literal sense. It won't make sense. So the translators.
But nevertheless, what does the word mean? What's the root of the word?
The word is histaifut.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Which means a result of. Histaifut means a result of.
Oh, okay.
So now it makes it look. Go back. Hitorah shlema bahalochas merubos mistaifim, which give itself out, express itself. Its result is Lipirkei achsharo pirkei anoga, to create proper prakim. It literally means chapters, pieces, but it means ideas of preparation, hachshara, and pirkei anoga, proper chapters of conduct.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, before we finish, I want to hear from everyone. Was it clear? Avi, Yoni, yes.
Yeah, Rebbe, so remember, we were learning before Pesach, a few months ago maybe even, about this thing when you learn Gemara. So you said you should there's a word, I forgot what you used in Yiddish. You said there's something about schwitz, but you used a different word for schwitz.
I used the word Harevanya.
Yeah, Harevanya.
In the yeshiva world, they'll say Hareve. Are you hareving? Are you hareving?
Right. You're saying this is the same kind of
absolutely.
Effort.
It's the same idea. Yegia is effort and diligence. So in Yiddish, it's hareve. When you hareve, when you get all excited and you're thinking and you're working and you get verschwitzt. But it doesn't literally mean schwitz. It means the Yiddish translation. What?
Stagnit.
Yeah, they use the word steig, but steig is not the literal meaning of the word. Anyway, Yaakov, any comments? Yaakov. Sleeping. Okay. Avi, is it clear? Okay.
We're good.
Yaakov, is it clear?
Yaakov's on mute. There he goes.
Now, thank you.
Okay,
yes.
okay. I need some feedback tonight. I just don't want to, if something's not clear and you need more commentary, explanation, ask me and I'll try to do it. Yes, Moshe, what do you want to say?
I was just going to say this already is fascinating, raising a question in my mind. We have today, we look at today, 100 years later, 100 years plus later than when this was written, we see that the yeshiva world in general, across the board, amongst all chugim,
right,
is like wow, right? But we don't. It's rare, at least for me. It's rare when I hear about a institute or learning situation set up to train mahanchim how to really to be a real educator.
Yeah, but I don't know how it's in Eretz Yisrael, but I know here, Chabad in Crown Heights, they have an entire organization that works on training Malamdim.
Is that the Lamplighter?
No, Lamplighter, by the way, closed. No, it's called Igud HaMechanchim, and I know who runs it, and they have meetings, and again they it's recently new. They never had this. So, and I think it's not only Chabad. There's more. I just see there's more that are doing this. But again, you see, the problem is in large yeshivas, this is so difficult. Where this can be more successful is, like you say, training the educators. But you imagine someone who went through a training session like this, comes into a classroom with 25 boys or 25 girls. It's very difficult to go, during the course of a day, and it's a difficult thing. In a smaller yeshiva, and that's why smaller yeshivas are so much more popular now, and it's an excellent thing that there are small yeshivas. Yes, it costs more probably tuition-wise, but nevertheless, it gives the mechanech and the mechunach, the educator and the student, the ability to accomplish more of what it says here. But this is a revolution, and you should know that this was used. I mean, again, he writes this in 1898. They started to use it in the yeshiva, and we know those students, and we have their great-grandchildren alive today. And we see clearly that something worked. And remember, you have to always remember, you're fighting against enlightenment, haskalah, or today you're fighting against the internet and the gadgets. And no one can sit still. And everyone hates to read. And people don't write anymore. So we're confronting that issue today. They will come, right? So you have to put that into perspective. So just as the battle was against Haskalah at the time, over 100 years ago, now we have another type of battle. But with this type of an approach, he says you will have success. And they had success then. Otherwise, the yeshiva would have closed up. And the Chabad yeshiva, it never closed up. They had to run away in 1815. They went to Kremenchuk in Ukraine and then to Rostov. And the yeshivas... The yeshiva today is a continuation of the yeshiva. Never closed. Torah Chitmim never closed. From 1897. It's been open every single year. Sometimes in the underground, running here, running there, but it's been open. So the system works. This educational tool definitely works. But as he says, in that second paragraph, it's a lot of work. And, what I said before about paying teachers, I really meant it. Because if we could create such a teachers and educators, they're worth everything. Because they will raise a new generation of leaders and healthy people. You know what I'm saying? So it's an investment. I mean, and that's why, we need to invest in education. It's popular to invest in a Chabad house, or in the outreach organization, everyone, it's all important. College campuses, it's all important. I'm not saying it isn't. But educators, you need educators. And not everyone is an educator. And in the past, as some of you know who are a little older, you had in Talmud Torahs in America. And it's so in Eretz Yisrael. I'll tell you, one of my grandchildren has a Rebbe. The Rebbe picked him up or pushed him, And it's like, and you can't get through the Rebbe. He's been doing this for 30 years. And the kids are wild, no question about it, But, hey, and it's very hard to change an old horse, excuse the expression. So we have issues. This is part of the issues. Hopefully, we will understand this and share it, and it'll benefit us. But again, it also benefit us as parents and grandparents. Okay, Chevra, we'll learn tomorrow again. Have a great day, and it's Rosh Chodesh year. So shalom ubracha, and we'll talk soon. Zai gesund. Bye bye.
Go ahead. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.